Welcome back to Beyond Your Balance Sheet, a series connecting mental and physical wellness as a critical part of financial outlook and financial health. The Sedoric Group of Steward Partners Financial Planners is sponsoring this conversation series as part of its wider goal to help clients live fulfilling lives. The Sedoric Group believes creating successful monetary outcomes is a multidimensional equation. As planners, they help clients achieve success by working with the numbers, but accumulating financial resources is only part of the puzzle. To help someone achieve true fulfillment, they recognize the importance of the client's mind, body, heart, and soul. So, with that mission in mind today, we're going to talk about failure and rejection. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute, what do these have to do with mental health and wellness? Failure and rejection make people feel terrible. And while that's certainly the case for most of us, our guest today provides another view, that failure is often the starting point for achievement. We're talking with Casey Snyder, who knows a thing or two about this. Now today, Casey is a partner, senior vice president, and wealth manager at the Sedoric Group of Steward Partners. And by all typical definitions, he's found success. An impressive career he enjoys, a family, a home, and a lovely community, meaningful friendships. But Casey's path was, as he puts it, irregular and paved with setbacks. It's a journey he described in a graduation speech at Great Bay Community College in May of 2019. There's a lot to learn from his story, and we'll dive into it now. So Casey, welcome. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you, Laura. It's great to talk to you as well.
So before this interview, Casey, I looked up a bunch of quotes about failure. Here's just a few. Do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. That's from Nelson Mandela. Discouragement and failure are two of the surest stepping stones to success. That's from Dale Carnegie. And my favorite, Casey, failure is success in progress. And that one's from Albert Einstein. So how about you, Casey? How do you like to summarize the sort of broader meaning of failure in your own life?
So I would say that failure has provided me the opportunity to look at something from a different perspective. The rejections, the setbacks, the failures provide another opportunity, and you get to take what you learned from the last attempt and use it in your next. And in some weird way, failure has created it's sort of the precursor to success. The failure itself creates the opportunity. It's the comeback story. It creates the story in itself. So I have found that over my last probably 25 years that most of my achievements have started off with some sort of rejection or setback when I really thought about it.
Yeah, I was really struck by that in your graduation speech. You said every single achievement you've had started with a setback, a rejection, a failure. So let's talk about that, Casey, because it's pretty compelling. And that irregular path, I love the way you described that. Higher education, that's often a place where young adults encounter major failure or rejection for the first time in a really big way. Was that the case with you, Casey? Higher education was where you really started learning these uncomfortable lessons.
Yeah, it started with education. There was also a bit of athletics thrown in there because I am a 5'4" and really enjoyed playing soccer in high school and into college. And at 5'4", I was overlooked more often than not. So taking the soccer field in itself, I always had a chip on my shoulder in that sense, where I was always underestimated or overlooked. But academically, I graduated from a high school that had a pretty high standard for academic achievement. And the majority of students that I graduated with went off to traditional four-year schools, or many went off to prestigious four-year schools. And I went off to Champlain College, which at the time had just converted from a community college / two-year program to a four-year school. So it still very much had the feeling of a junior college. After my first semester, I had a 1.42. I think
Wait,
that was,
what?
yeah, my
That's not
first,
very good, Casey.
no, it wasn't. I think that was the low point from my parents' perspective.
Oh my gosh.
It was a very difficult transition. But I was able to pull it together. So a series of setbacks or rejections early on, but I was able to turn it around, recommit myself, and by the end of my third semester, I had decided that I would like to transfer to the University of Vermont. They too essentially said no, speaking of this theme of rejection and setbacks along the way. But I let them know that there really was no plan B, and I would do whatever I needed to do for them to accept me. So I'm pretty sure I stopped by their admissions office on a daily basis with a cup of coffee for a number of weeks, asking if they had accepted me yet. So I'm not sure if they really accepted me because they wanted to or just because they felt obligated to at some point.
Or to keep the free coffee coming, maybe.
Maybe so.
So you almost flunked out of what was then called junior college, but through sort of being persistent, you did manage to go on to that four-year school. What did you do after graduation, Casey? Because this is where the sort of string of setbacks, failures, if you want to call them that, really start to pile up for you. So what happened after graduation?
So it was 2003, 2004. I went into the mortgage industry, not knowing what I wanted to do. The mortgage industry was hot. The housing market was heating up in dramatic fashion. A family member of mine knew somebody who ran a mortgage office. With a background in psychology and sociology, I knew nothing about mortgages, but found it to be an exciting challenge. And I spent the first 6 months of my career living in this very small office, reading nothing but underwriting guidelines and learning the ropes, while also waiting tables to try to survive. So I was broke. I was working about 60, 65 hours a week.
Wow.
In an industry I knew nothing about, and slowly started to build some momentum and felt like I was gaining some traction and maybe headed somewhere. That ended up not being the case. So a pretty significant roadblock at the age of 24. Again, as I thought I was just starting to come into my own a little bit, I was arrested and charged with trespassing in the attempt to commit a breaking and entering at my neighbor's house, who ended up being a very influential member of Harvard University in Cambridge.
Oh my gosh, not the kind of person whose house you want to accidentally break into. So you got to just back up there a little bit for us, Casey, because again, knowing who you are now, you're a partner, you're a wealth manager, to hear you say that you actually had a felony charge for breaking and entering, we should just stop there for a little bit. So you were working very hard, you were working in a restaurant, you were working in the mortgage industry, you were just starting to pull it together. You went out with some friends one night, you had a little too much to drink. Small people, right, can't consume as much alcohol as large people. So there you have it. So you thought you were going home, but you ended up trying to break into your neighbor's house? Do I have that right?
Pretty much. So I knew I had drank too much. I knew I hailed a cab. I knew I got home, and I'm confident I was home between the hours of 10:30 and 11 because I had called somebody on my cell phone. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning being hit over the back of the head by a baton because I was being arrested on my neighbor's back porch.
Wow.
I have no recollection of what happened between the hours of 10:30 and 4:30. I will always remember calling my mother from the Cambridge Police Department without really an explanation for what happened. But because of who it was, the charges were upheld, and I had a number of court hearings or court appointments over the coming months, and ended up more broke, further behind, and really thought that was a low point pretty early on after college. Wasn't doing very well. I'll say that.
Did you lose your job at the mortgage company?
I did not. Thankfully, my mentor and the person who owned the company was very understanding, was very accommodating for the time off that was now necessary, and chalked it up to a story for the ages once you get into some of the details. But was very understanding.
Yeah, who wants to be a story for the ages? Not most people, but so your boss was accommodating, that's good in the mortgage industry, but you made a switch not long after that incident, right, Casey? You were struggling in the mortgage industry, even though your boss was nice and let you stay on. What happened there?
Yeah, that was probably the low point. So a couple months after my arrest, I was in the office. I had just recommended a mortgage product that I thought I had done by the book, textbook, very clean recommendation. And their certified financial planner called me one afternoon and essentially assaulted me over the phone using every
Wow.
four-letter word they could come up with about the recommendation that I had made. And it was truly a life-altering experience. I was, uh, again, broke. I think I was eating canned soup, cold canned soup that day. And when I hung up the phone, I essentially broke down. I realized how little I understood about one's financial life. I thought I did everything correctly. I packed up my belongings. I got in the car and went home. And it was on my way home that an advertisement for becoming a certified financial planner came on the radio on WEEI Sports Talk Radio. I was driving down the Mass Pike. I literally veered off the exit onto Sturo Drive and pulled up in front of Boston University where they were having the open house for the certified financial planning curriculum that night. I sat outside. I waited for the open house. I sat there and was infatuated with it. It was the most fascinating hour that I'd had in a very long time, and I signed up on the spot. It was also humiliating because of how I arrived at the open house. And so it was humiliating, it was humbling, but it was there where I really discovered my passion and signed up again on the spot and completed the curriculum over the course of the next 2 years and planned my transition away from the mortgage industry into the financial planning world.
That's one of those moments, isn't it, Casey, where you just, there's a signal. Someone, somewhere is telling you something, and you follow the signal. And here you are today, but not without another setback or two or three, right? Before you actually got to where you are now with the Sedoric Group. So you finished the financial planning program. You applied for a couple jobs and more rejections, right?
Yeah, quite a bit. So I finished the certified financial planning curriculum, never took the exam, started interviewing with firms in 2007 and early 2008, was turned away by all of them. There was even an entry-level exam that was meant to be a predictor for future success, where I had the interviewing company suggest that I pursue a different career path. Uh, I ended up finding a company that didn't require any entry-level exams, so I could pass my credentials. And then when I did find the office that I ended up eventually being hired by, they too actually turned me away because of the record dating back to my arrest in
Oh, criminal
2004,
record. Sure. Wow.
which was that was again another low point of I went through all of this over the last 4 years, and now I may not be able to pursue the career that I had set out to pursue.
You know, the I want to pick up the thread of the story in a moment, but the theme of this series, Beyond Your Balance Sheet, is mental health and wellness. How did you even keep yourself mentally healthy during that time, Casey? I mean, you've mentioned several really difficult low points. How did you keep your chin at least halfway up?
My family. I mean, frankly, it was I had a lot of support. I had a lot of people telling me never to quit all along, but I was not sure if I could overcome the arrest and the record as a result of that. That was new. That was the first time in my life that I felt like no matter what I do, no matter what I learn from the setbacks, I'm not sure if I can logistically or mechanically, I guess, overcome a regulatory requirement or barrier. And I would say it's dumb luck that I was able, or that somebody was willing to take a chance on me in the manner of which they did. I'd like to say that the luck was a result of persistence. I don't know though. In looking back, and this is where when talking about failure or rejection, there are certain opportunities along the way if you stick with it. And when you do get one of those opportunities, you want to make sure that you don't let anyone else down. And that was one of them.
I want to remind everybody that this is Beyond Your Balance Sheet, a series examining mental and physical wellness, sponsored by the Sedoric Group of Steward Partners Financial Planners, in recognition that client success is defined not just by accumulating wealth, but also by wider attention to the health of mind, body, and spirit. Now, we're talking today with Casey Snyder about the role of rejection and failure in achievement. And so, Casey, just to put a fine point on the rest of the story, you ultimately did come to the Sedoric Group after that first financial firm, and then started seeing some successes from there. That sounds like that was the end of the low points for a while, at least. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I would say so. I started to chip away at success slowly. As others invested in me, I didn't want to let anyone down. The other, upon being hired in 2008, I launched into my career just as the world economy came to a standstill. So there was that initial, I think what many would view as a setback, but to me, it was a very unique opportunity to enter into a profession and then experience a once in a century like event within your first year. Provides for a lot of perspective that others may have waited years for within their respective careers. So I was fortunate for the bizarre timing of everything.
Right. Starting your career in financial planning when a lot of people's finances were, in shaky condition, to say the least. I like what you said, Casey, about chipping away at success. I started chipping away at success. That image appeals to me because it seems like success isn't one giant hallelujah moment. It's little moments by moments that you keep reaching for. Talk a little bit more about that chipping away at success.
Takes a lot of time and a lot of failure. I mean, for all of the little successes I've had far more setbacks. But it's the setbacks that I think provide the perspective that help, whether it be with pursuing a goal or it helps with perspective or awareness that others may have, because success doesn't occur within a vacuum. That's the other. It takes a village. It takes people either supporting you or investing in you or carving out the time for you and wanting to help along the way. And I think slowly over time, they begin to accumulate.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Which is exciting. That's the fun part of it, is you start to accumulate a lot of experiences and a lot of different perspectives, and build a network of people, many of which have suffered their own setbacks that may be similar or different, but then you can start to share in those, sort of a communal feel.
Success doesn't happen in a vacuum. I like that too. I'm gonna take that away, Casey. That's good. But speaking of all these, quotes about failure and success, and we talked about some of those earlier in this interview. Um, Despite those, when people are in the midst of a failure or rejection, it's hard to say, "Oh, failure is my greatest teacher. Thank you, failure." It's hard to view the big picture. Most of us can just only see one thing, and that's our disappointment. How much do you think, Casey, these lessons, quote unquote, from failure can only be seen in hindsight? Are we capable of even seeing them in the moment?
I've never been capable of seeing those lessons in the moment. The only thing that I've been able to derive in the moment, or the only silver lining that I've ever been able to come up with, is that I know that I will have greater perspective or greater empathy for others as a result of what I'm experiencing myself. And I guess the easy example is I will never be able to help my son or daughter with heartbreak unless I've experienced heartbreak myself. I won't know how to help my kids stand back up if I haven't had to get back up myself. So in the moment, that's the only silver lining I've ever been able to come up with, is I've experienced this for whatever reason, but I will now be better at helping my family or friends or children or clients with their own failures, setbacks, rejections, heartaches, diagnoses, whatever it may be. There's curveballs. That's what life is. It's a series of curveballs. And it's a matter of figuring out how you find your new normal on the other side of it.
Boy, a new normal, we can all relate to that after 2 years of a pandemic. Given what you've learned from these setbacks, earlier in your adult life, from these failures and rejections, let's call them what they are, how do you view setbacks now when they happen to you, Casey? Um, sure, when you're young, it's hard, but are you now, as an adult, able to have that broader perspective?
I think as a young adult or child, I viewed setbacks as being something to be more afraid of or keep quiet.
Mm,
Certainly did not want to go and share with the world my arrest shortly thereafterwards, or share with the world that I had failed an entry-level exam that was meant to be a predictor of success, etc.
yeah.
Uh, what I think with where I am now, I find that the more you share in your vulnerabilities, the more you can relate to others and the more comfortable others are sharing their own stories. And what I find is that we all have them. There's nothing unique about my story. It's just a story, no different than anyone else's. But in sharing my story, I then get to hear others. And I think it was my diagnosis in 2011 that really opened my eyes up to how when you share in your vulnerabilities, others become that much more comfortable in discussing their own. And then you learn a lot more. And then you are able to learn other people's perspectives in a way that then can help someone else. And again,
Yeah, you
that's
get
kind of
stronger.
twisting
Yeah.
failure into opportunity or chipping away at successes.
Can you share a little bit more with us, Casey, about your diagnosis? You don't have to go into the medical details, but just sort of how that backdrop of your irregular path, the setbacks that you've told us about, how that kind of girded you for dealing with your unwelcome diagnosis.
Yeah, it was 2011, and it was only a few years into my career. So again, I felt like I was gaining momentum and building some success when I was diagnosed with what may be some would call a rare autoimmune disease called sarcoidosis. It's sort of a chameleon or a snowflake of autoimmune disease, and it can take many shapes or forms. At an early age, I felt what it was like to feel like I was relinquishing control over my future in some sense.
Mm.
That the decisions now are not all mine. There were likely to be limitations at some point, whether it be dietary, whether it be activity wise, maybe it was travel, I don't know. But at 31, I suddenly felt like I was relinquishing control in some way that made me feel very uncomfortable. And looking inward and thinking about what it is that we do for a living, it was a very eye-opening experience. And a lot of what planning is about is trying to help people retain control over their future. And I felt like it had been snatched from me. That in itself, there's no other way I would have gained that perspective if it wasn't for the experience in itself. So I'm, in hindsight, grateful for it. It has changed my life. I would say that it's changed my life for the better because of all that I've learned, all that I've been able to relate to others about. And again, it's an experience that I wouldn't have been able to accumulate any other way.
Wow, at 31, that's tough though, Casey. You're supposed to be Superman at 31, right?
That's what I
So,
thought.
yeah.
That's what I thought. And that's why it was so eye-opening. And but back to your, I think, original question about failure today. I
Right.
find that failures today, the more vulnerable we can all be, the more we all benefit. Uh, and granted, I try to limit them. Don't get me
Yeah,
wrong. I'm not looking for
that's
failure.
human nature, of course.
But if they do happen, I do feel like I have a great supporting cast. I have great friends and family, and um, that would help me through it.
Just about everybody, even if they had a perfect life, just about everybody in the past 2 years has experienced some type of setback due to the pandemic, either a major struggle with illness or death of a loved one, to just, canceled plans and anniversaries and trips and social isolation. How do you think, Casey, given your experience, these difficult past 2 years, let's not sugarcoat them, it's been tough. How do you think this time might affect our overall resilience, including our ability to bounce back from rejection or setback?
I I don't know if I'm qualified to
Yeah.
provide a formal answer on that. I would say that I think there's some out there that are probably more resilient than they thought they were. I think
Mm.
there's some out there who are in search of some resilience and would really welcome some resilience given how hard the last 2 years have been for so many. I think more importantly than anything, I think it's now a topic of discussion. I think the vulnerability factor, where to share intimate details of your life used to be frowned upon in some ways. And I don't feel like that's the case anymore. I feel like the more vulnerable people are, the more conversations are had, the more solutions are put in place, the stronger the support structure, and the more opportunities that lie ahead. So I'm hopeful. I'll say that I'm hopeful that because of how much of a discussion it has now become, that we will all be better off for it on the other side of this.
Well, and certainly we see major sports stars and celebrities coming out, talking about their own mental health challenges. And you just gave me the perfect segue, Casey. So thank you to ask my last question. And that is this series that we're conducting right now, Beyond Your Balance Sheet. What made you start thinking that this is a service that, as a financial planner, you should offer your clients? Because it's pretty unique, actually. Financial planners will tell you what the stock market is doing or what interest rates are doing, but it's pretty unusual for a financial planning group to focus on client mental health and wellness.
I think the pandemic provided the perfect reminder that we needed to recognize that in our quest to help others achieve fulfilling lives, whether it be before retirement or after retirement, that there's a lot more that goes into it than just a secure balance sheet. And we have known either directly or indirectly a lot of people that look great from afar. Others would be envious of them. Their balance sheet looks great. Everybody says they have it all. But when you peel back the curtain, you know that there's a lot going on that really prevents them from finding that happy balance that so many others are in search of. And so when we think about how everyone defines success, and success is different to everyone, but we know that there is a lot of subjects that either add or detract from fulfillment, from happiness, from that involve the mind, body, heart, and soul, and all of that resides outside of one's balance sheet. So we as fiduciaries are in a unique position to try to help people achieve their definition of success or fulfillment. And I think for us to not acknowledge these seemingly ancillary elements that greatly influence one's outcome would be silly of us. So this is I think an opportunity for us to try to tackle some subjects that we know a lot of others are dealing with, whether it be opportunities or obstacles, in pursuit of that goal.
Well, it's really been a pleasure for me to work on this series with you, so I'm excited to keep it going. For now, Casey, thank you very much. I really appreciate you talking with us today. It's been really interesting to hear your story and your perspective.
Thank you, Laura. It's an honor.
That's Casey Snyder. He's a partner, senior vice president, and wealth manager at the Sedoric Group of Steward Partners Financial Planners. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you'll join us for the next episode of Beyond Your Balance Sheet. Keep your eyes on this website for more information. Thanks, everyone, for being with us.